Close your eyes for a second. Imagine you're a child. No food. No water. No bed to sleep in. Just darkness. Just silence. Just the sound of your own breathing in a house that no longer feels like home. Now open your eyes, because for 3 children in New Mexico this was real life. For 4 long years they lived alone in filth, trapped inside walls that smelled of rot and despair. No parents. No teachers. No one checking in. Just them. Forgotten. Starving. Slowly fading into the background of a world that didn't seem to care. It wasn't until one phone call, one desperate tip, that authorities finally came to that house. And what they found inside would haunt them forever. Let me take you there. Let me show you what they saw. The front yard was overgrown, weeds choking what little life remained. A rusted bike lay on its side, half buried in dirt. The windows, covered in grime, let in almost no light. And the smell, it hit before they even stepped inside. Rot. Decay. The kind of stench that clings to you so thick it coats your throat. It made officers gag. Some covered their noses, but it didn't help. Nothing could prepare them for what they were about to see. Inside, the floor was barely visible beneath mountains of trash. Mold climbed up the walls. The toilet, overflowing. The bathtub, filled with human waste. Cockroaches scurried under piles of rotting food. And in the middle of it all, 3 children standing there staring back. Barefoot. Thin. Covered in filth. Their hair matted. Their clothes stiff with dirt and sweat. No emotion on their faces. No fear. No relief. Just emptiness. 4 years they had survived on scraps. Food left on the porch. Water from the toilet when there was nothing else. No birthdays. No holidays. Just endless days of hunger, sickness, and silence. And their mother? She was nowhere to be found. She had left them there. Walked away and never looked back. Now, let me ask you this. How does a mother abandon her children like this? How does a town not notice? How does a horror like this go on for 4 years, without anyone stepping in? Tonight we dig deeper. We uncover the truth. And what we find will leave you speechless. But first, let's go back to the moment police knocked on that door. Because what happened next, no one saw coming. Welcome to True Crime Stories videos. I welcome you, my viewers, and most especially my subscribers, for your support as we keep improving and bringing you daily told and untold true crime stories. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. The call came in just after midnight. A woman's voice, quiet, uncertain. She didn't give her name. Just an address. Just a few short words. There are kids in that house, and they're not okay. Dispatch asked for details. How long had they been alone? What exactly was wrong? But the caller hesitated. She wasn't sure. She had never seen anyone come in or out. No parents. No visitors. Just a house that sat there, rotting, silent, almost forgotten. And inside, 3 children, living in something she could only describe as hell. Deputies were sent out. Just a welfare check, nothing urgent. But as they pulled up to the house, something felt off. The yard was dead. Not just overgrown, not just messy. Dead. Like nothing had lived there in years. Windows were covered in dust and grime. No curtains. No movement inside. The front door, chipped paint, rusted handle, stood closed, but somehow, it still felt like the house was swallowing itself, caving in under the weight of whatever was inside. They knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. Then as they turned to leave, a sound. Faint. From inside. A shuffle. A whisper. Something or someone was in there. One officer moved to the window, wiped away a layer of dirt, and looked inside. What he saw made him freeze. Trash. Everywhere. Not just messy, not just dirty, this was something else. This was years of filth. Rotting food, broken furniture, dark stains on the walls. And in the middle of it all, a child. Thin. Motionless. Eyes locked on him, but empty. Hollow. They called for backup. This wasn't just a welfare check anymore. This was something worse. When they forced the door open, the smell hit like a punch to the gut. The kind of smell that makes your eyes water, your stomach turn. Rot. Decay. Feces. Vomit. Air so thick with filth you could taste it. And then, silence. No crying. No shouting. Just silence. The first officer stepped inside, boots sinking into layers of garbage. He moved carefully, scanning the room. The walls, covered in grime, smeared with something dark. The floors, vanished beneath piles of rotting trash, old clothes, plastic bags filled with God knows what. The kitchen, Dishes stacked high in the sink, but the fridge, empty. The pantry, bare. Then, movement. A second child appeared from behind a broken couch. Another set of eyes, wide and unblinking. No words. No reaction. Just watching. And then, a third. 3 children. Standing there, silent, motionless. Like ghosts trapped in their own home. Their clothes stiff with dirt. Their hair tangled and thick with grease. Their skin pale, almost gray. Their bones sharp, pressing against their skin. They looked like they hadn't eaten in days. Maybe weeks. One officer spoke softly. "Where are your parents?" "Nothing." Another tried. "Are you hurt?" Still nothing. They didn't speak. Didn't cry. Didn't move. Just stood there staring. As if they had already given up. One officer turned, whispered into his radio. "We need child services. Now." Because whatever had happened here, whatever these kids had been through, this was only the beginning. Inside that house, time didn't move the way it should. Days blurred into nights. Nights stretched into years. And for 3 children there was no before, no after, only survival. No one came to check on them. No teachers, no doctors, no friends knocking on the door. Just them. Forgotten by the world, locked in a home that was falling apart around them. They learned to live with hunger. At first they cried when their stomachs ached. Then the crying stopped. They knew there was no food coming. When the cabinets were empty they searched the trash. When the trash ran out they scraped crumbs from the floor. And when there was nothing left, nothing at all, they drank from the toilet. Sometimes their mother came back. But she never stayed. She left bags of cheap food on the floor and disappeared again. No hugs. No questions. Just silence. And when the food ran out, the waiting began all over again. They stopped hoping for more. They learned to stretch what little they had. A handful of crackers had to last a week. A single can of beans had to be shared. They chewed slowly, swallowed carefully, tried to ignore the hunger that never really went away. But food was only part of the nightmare. The house was alive with filth. Cockroaches scurried across the walls. Rats nested in the piles of garbage. The air was thick, heavy, crawling with the smell of rot. And they had to live in it. Breathe it. Sleep in it. They got sick. Over and over again. Fevers burned through their small bodies. Their stomachs cramped. Their skin broke out in rashes. But there were no doctors, no medicine, no warm hands to take care of them. Just cold, dirty floors and the sound of their own weak breathing. They barely spoke to each other. What was there to say? They had lived this way for so long, words didn't matter anymore. They forgot what a normal life looked like. School was a distant memory. The outside world, a place they weren't sure even existed anymore. The windows were covered in dirt so thick, no sunlight made it through. Day or night, it was always dark. Always cold. Always the same. One of the children used to count days. Scratched lines into the wall with a broken fork. But after a while, they stopped. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing changed. No one came. Until that night. Until the knock on the door. Until the voices of strangers broke through the silence. Until the moment they realized, someone had finally found them. She was their mother. The one who was supposed to protect them, feed them, love them. But she left them there. She walked away, shut the door, and never looked back. And while her children wasted away inside that rotting house, she was out in the world, living like nothing was wrong. She came back sometimes, but never for long. Just enough to drop off a few bags of food, cheap, stale, never enough. Crackers, dry cereal, cans they couldn't even open without struggling. She never stayed. Never hugged them. Never asked if they were okay. She left as quickly as she came, locking the door behind her. She had a life. A life where she laughed, partied, met friends, took pictures, shared posts online like she was just another woman in the world. No one looking at her would have known, would have guessed, that 3 of her own children were starving in filth while she smiled for the camera. She didn't miss them. She didn't care. And when people started asking questions, when police started looking, her story didn't add up. At first she said she was taking care of them, that she checked on them all the time, that they were fine. But the officers had seen the house, had seen the children, and they knew she was lying. She told another story, said she had no choice, said she was struggling, said life was hard. But she wasn't the one covered in dirt. She wasn't the one sleeping on floors. She wasn't the one digging through garbage just to eat. The truth was simple, she left them there. And she didn't care what happened to them. But the law did. The investigation began. Authorities dug into her past. They found records, reports of neglect, warnings, signs that had been ignored. This wasn't new. This wasn't sudden. She had been failing them for years. Neighbors said they heard things sometimes, crying, muffled voices, but no one ever knocked. No one ever stepped in. People assumed. People forgot. And that's exactly how she got away with it for so long. Then came the moment she couldn't run from. The police found her. Not in hiding. Not in distress. She was out, living her life like nothing had happened. She was laughing when they arrived. That laughter stopped the moment she saw their faces. They asked her where her children were. She didn't answer. They asked her why she left them. She had nothing to say. The cuffs clicked around her wrists, cold and tight. For the first time in years, she was the one locked away. But what about those kids? What happens now? After 4 years of darkness, how do they find the light? 4 years. For long, brutal years. 3 children, abandoned, starving, trapped in a house of filth. And yet, no one came. No one knocked. No one saved them. The question haunts this case. Oh, how does something like this happen in plain sight? How do 3 children disappear from the world and no one notices? The neighbors saw the house. They walked past it every day. They saw the windows, dark and lifeless. They smelled the rot when the wind changed. They heard things, soft shuffles, muffled cries, then silence. Always silence. Some had their suspicions. They whispered about it. Said something didn't feel right. But no one called. No one wanted to get involved. Maybe they thought someone else would step in. Maybe they were afraid of being wrong. Or maybe they just didn't care enough. One neighbor admitted later, "I figured the kids moved out. I never saw them." Another shrugged, "Didn't seem like my business." But it should have been someone's business. Those kids were locked in there, waiting, suffering, disappearing into the filth. And the world just kept moving around them. And it wasn't just the neighbors. The system, every layer of it, failed them too. No teachers called home. No truancy officers knocked on the door. The kids hadn't been in school for years, but somehow no one flagged it. No social worker followed up. No caseworker checked in. Reports had been made before, warnings, red flags, but they got buried under paperwork, lost in the shuffle, ignored. One worker admitted, "We were overloaded. Too many cases, not enough time." So these children fell through the cracks. Just names on a file no one had time to open. Just another case that got forgotten. And that's the chilling truth. This isn't the first time. This isn't the only case. There have been others. In California, a girl was found locked in a room, her body so frail she couldn't stand. She had lived in that darkness for over a decade. No one noticed. In Texas, a boy was discovered in a dog crate, covered in bruises, his siblings too scared to speak. The parents smiled in family photos. No one noticed. In Florida, a mother left her child in a motel room for months, showing up only to drop off fast food and leave again. The front desk saw the child. The housekeeping staff knew. No one noticed. And here, in this filthy Michigan home, 3 children waited. And no one noticed. Until that one call. One anonymous voice. One moment of suspicion. One person finally stepping forward. But why did it take so long? And more importantly, how many others are still out there, waiting, suffering, forgotten? 4 years of pain. 4 years of hunger, fear, and loneliness. Now the nightmare is over. But for these children, the scars remain. The question isn't just what happened to them, it's what happens now. They are free. Free from that rotting house, free from the filth, free from the silence that trapped them for so long. But freedom doesn't mean healed. Freedom doesn't erase the past. They have never known a normal life. A warm bed, a safe home, a hot meal every night, these are things they only dreamed of. Now, they have to learn how to live in a world they barely remember. The doctors say they are severely malnourished. Their bodies frail, their growth stunted. Their stomachs struggle to accept real food. Their skin, once covered in dirt, still shows signs of infection. Their hair, matted for years, had to be cut just to remove the filth. But the deepest wounds are the ones no one can see. They flinch at sudden movements. They don't know how to trust. They sit in silence for hours because silence is all they've ever known. When they sleep, they wake up gasping, still trapped in nightmares of the past. Therapists say recovery will take years, maybe a lifetime. Learning to speak about what happened. Learning to feel safe. Learning that they matter. And what about their mother? She sits in a jail cell now. No longer free to walk away, no longer free to ignore the children she abandoned. The law has caught up to her. The charges against her are severe: child neglect, abuse, endangerment. The prosecutors say they want the maximum sentence. The public wants justice. But will she get what she deserves? Her lawyer says she wasn't well. That she didn't mean for things to get so bad. That she loved her kids even if she failed them. But love doesn't leave children to starve. Love doesn't walk away for years. The trial is coming. The world is watching. And those children, they are waiting. Will she finally pay for what she did? And beyond this one case, another question remains: how do we stop this from happening again? Lawmakers talk about new policies, stricter welfare checks, stronger intervention systems. But we've heard these promises before. And still, children slip through the cracks. For every case we hear about, how many go unseen? How many more children are out there right now waiting for someone to notice? This time, 3 were saved. But what about the ones still trapped in the dark? 3 children. For years. No one came. No one saved them. Not until it was almost too late. But they weren't the first. And they won't be the last. Right now, as you hear these words, somewhere, a child is sitting in the dark. Trapped in filth. Starving. Forgotten. A child who has stopped crying because they know no one is listening. A child who is waiting, but no one is coming. And the terrifying truth? This story only made the news because someone finally spoke up. How many stories never make it? How many children suffer in silence, locked behind doors we never open? The neighbors walked past that house for years. The system ignored the warnings. The world kept moving while those children wasted away. And we ask ourselves, how did no one notice? How did no one act? But maybe the better question is, are we still ignoring it now? There are thousands of cases like this every year. Children hidden away, neglected, abused. Some are found. Some never are. And unless we do something, this will happen again. So what can we do? How do we stop this? We pay attention. We stop looking away. We speak up when something doesn't feel right. We report. We ask questions. We push for stronger protections. Because a single phone call, a single moment of courage, can save a life. These 3 children got out. But they will carry their scars forever. Their childhood was stolen. Their trust was shattered. No law, no sentence, no punishment can ever give them back what they lost. The mother sits in a cell now. The house stands empty, rotting, a silent reminder of everything that happened inside. But the story isn't over. Because there are more houses like it. More doors hiding pain. More children waiting for someone to notice. So the real question is, will you? If this story moved you, if it made you think, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that need to be heard. Leave a comment, your thoughts matter. And most importantly, share this video. Because the more people who know, the more children we can save. One voice can make a difference. Let's be that voice.